Millionaire kisses his new housekeeper to escape an arranged marriage and fell in love with her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Lucas Hale had attended enough high society galas to know the rhythm of a room before he even stepped inside, but tonight felt different. The crystal chandeliers above him glowed like 1,000 watchful eyes, and every polite smile aimed in his direction felt like a reminder of the arranged marriage his family insisted on. He moved through the crowd with the ease of a man born into privilege, yet every step carried the weight of a choice he refused to make. Just as the Ross family spokesperson called for everyone's attention, Lucas felt his chest tighten. He needed an escape, a lifeline, anything. That was when he saw her. Grace Miller, the new housekeeper, was weaving through guests with a tray of sparkling water balanced in both hands. Her posture was cautious, almost apologetic, like someone who knew she didn't belong in places lined with marble floors and custom floral arrangements. Lucas didn't think, he reacted. The panic in his chest collided with the determination in his veins, and he strode straight toward her. Grace barely had time to gasp when his hand brushed her elbow, steady but urgent. Her eyes widened, the soft brown of them reflecting surprise and a flicker of fear. Before she could speak, Lucas leaned in, his voice a tight whisper meant only for her. Please, I need your help. Then he kissed her. It wasn't a heated kiss, not romantic or rehearsed. It was sudden, desperate, the kind of impulsive act that makes a room freeze. Cameras clicked. Conversations halted. A ripple of gasps traveled through the ballroom like a shockwave. Grace's tray slipped just a little, glasses clinking but miraculously staying upright as she steadied them against her chest. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, her breath caught between confusion and disbelief. Lucas pulled back slowly, still close. Enough for only her to hear. I'm sorry. I'll explain everything. Just play along. Grace stood motionless, unsure if she should speak, run, or wake herself from whatever dream or nightmare this was. She had arrived at the Hale estate only 12 hours earlier, thinking her first night would be spent polishing silverware, not becoming an accidental headline. Flashbulbs continued snapping around them, but Lucas kept his gaze locked on her, silently begging for cooperation. Grace swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. What did you just drag me into? Lucas exhaled shakily, his expression a complicated mix of fear, defiance, and gratitude. The only way out of a life I don't choose. And in that suspended moment beneath glittering lights and stunned witnesses, their fates tangled for the first time. Grace's hands were still trembling long after the last camera flash faded, but Lucas gently guided her out of the ballroom and into a quiet hallway lined with framed photos of his family. The muffled hum of the gala echoed behind them, but here, the air felt colder, heavier. Grace pressed the tray against her stomach like a shield. You really need to tell me what just happened, she whispered, trying to steady her breathing. Lucas rubbed his temples, the weight of his choices settling across his shoulders. My family planned to announce my engagement tonight, he said softly. To someone I did not choose. Someone I do not love. I needed something that would make that announcement impossible. Grace blinked at him, disbelief flickering across her face. So you kissed the new housekeeper? Lucas met her eyes with a seriousness that made her breath catch. I kissed the only person in this room who was not part of the deal. For a moment, neither spoke. Grace felt the floor steady beneath her feet again, but her thoughts spun like loose pages caught in the wind. She had taken this job to pay her mother's hospital bills, not to become a shield in a billionaire's family war. She took a small step back, shaking her head. Mr. Hale, I could lose my job for this. People saw. They will talk. Lucas lowered his gaze for a moment, guilt tightening his jaw. I know. I am sorry. I never planned to involve anyone, especially not you. But I promise I will not let this ruin your life. The sincerity in his voice softened her defensiveness, but not her confusion. So what now? Lucas exhaled slowly. Now I have to fix the mess I made before it becomes bigger. I need a few minutes. Please wait in the staff lounge. I will come find you after I handle my parents. Grace hesitated, then nodded. She moved toward the service corridor, her steps uneven but determined. As she walked away, she could feel the weight of 100 invisible eyes still clinging to her. She kept hearing the echo of those cameras clicking. It felt unreal, like she had stepped into a world she had no map for. The staff lounge was small and quiet, with a coffee maker humming on a side table. Grace sank into a chair, pressing her palms to her cheeks. First day, she murmured to herself. First day. She closed her eyes, trying to make sense of everything. In another part of the mansion, Lucas stood before his parents. His mother looked stunned, his father annoyed but controlled. They fired questions at him, but he answered with calm finality. He would not marry Madeline Ross. He would not consider any arrangement built on business interests. And after everything that had happened in front of the cameras, the Ross family would hardly push for a public engagement anymore. When he finally returned to the staff lounge, Grace looked up sharply, half expecting more trouble. But Lucas simply stood there, hands in his pockets, expression softer than before. Grace, he said quietly, I think we need to talk about what comes next. Her pulse quickened. Whatever he was about to say, she knew it would change everything again. Grace felt her heartbeat pick up as Lucas stepped farther into the lounge, closing the door behind him with a soft click, as if he wanted to keep the outside world from crashing in on them again. He looked different now, less like the untouchable billionaire the cameras adored, and more like a man who had just run out of ways to protect himself. Grace straightened in her chair, her fingers lacing together tightly in her lap. What happens next? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Lucas exhaled and took the seat across from her, elbows resting loosely on his knees. The moment I kissed you, he began carefully, my parents realized I would not go through with their plan. They are furious, confused, and probably reconsidering every decision they ever made about my future. He paused, searching her expression. But the damage is already done. The cameras captured enough for people to make their own stories. And they will. Grace swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Meaning I will be dragged into those stories. Lucas nodded slowly. Yes, and I owe you protection from that. He reached into his jacket and placed a neatly folded document on the coffee table between them. Grace stared at it, but did not reach for it. What is that? A proposal, he said. Not a romantic one. A practical one. A contract that would give us both some control over what happens next. Grace felt her breath hitch. A contract? What for? Lucas held her gaze, steady and unblinking. To be my partner in public. Not permanently. Not romantically. Just long enough for the arranged marriage negotiations to collapse completely. Grace blinked in disbelief. You want me to pretend to date you? Lucas nodded once. Yes. 5 events. That is all. After that, you walk away with your job secure, your mother's medical bills paid in full, and absolutely no obligation to me. Grace looked down at her hands, a swell of emotions pushing against her ribs. She had taken this job because she was desperate, because life had cornered her. But this was something else. This could change everything. Why would you trust me with something so big? She asked quietly. Lucas hesitated, and for a moment, his polished confidence softened. Because you were the only person in that room tonight who did not want anything from me. Grace felt heat rise in her chest, not from embarrassment, but from the unexpected weight of his words. She slowly reached for the contract, her fingers brushing the edge of the paper. If I say yes, she whispered, will you keep your word about helping my mother? I will, Lucas answered instantly. I already spoke to the hospital. Her care will be covered, regardless of what you decide. Grace froze, her eyes widening. You already did it? He nodded again. I could not ask you to step into my chaos without giving you stability first. Something shifted in Grace then, something deep and quiet. A thread of trust, fragile but real. She unfolded the contract, scanning the clear, respectful boundaries written in plain language. No intimacy. No shared room. No interference in each other's personal lives. 5 events only. She lifted her gaze to him. And after 5 events? Lucas held her eyes, his voice low. After 5 events, you get your life back, and I get mine. Grace drew a slow breath, the decision forming inside her like a steady flame. All right, she said softly. I will do it. Lucas's shoulders relaxed for the first time that night. Thank you, he murmured. You might have just saved us both. The Hale estate's driveway was already lined with polished cars when Lucas and Grace stepped out into the late morning sunlight. The charity luncheon was being hosted at a lakeside country club, a place known for white tablecloths, soft piano music, and conversations layered with polite judgment. Grace smoothed the skirt of her navy dress as she walked beside Lucas, her pulse steady but alert. She had rehearsed for this, practiced every gesture, but nothing compared to the real thing. As they approached the club entrance, cameras flashed from a discreet distance. Grace felt her breath tighten, but Lucas subtly shifted closer, his hand brushing the small of her back in a guiding gesture. "Breathe," he murmured. "You are doing perfectly." Inside, the room glittered with silverware and bright midday light. Guests turned to look at them immediately. Lucas's presence commanded attention, but Grace could feel the weight of curious eyes drifting toward her, evaluating, guessing, judging. She kept her chin steady and repeated the routine they had practiced. When they were greeted by a board member of the charity foundation, Grace extended her hand with measured confidence. "Thank you for inviting us," she said clearly. Her voice wavered only slightly. Lucas glanced at her, pride flickering in his eyes. For a moment, the noise of the room softened. They found their seats near the front, where a panoramic view of the lake shimmered through tall windows. Grace tried to focus on the scenery, but a familiar voice cut through the hum of conversation. Madeline Ross approached, her smile poised but sharp. "Lucas," she said sweetly, "it is lovely to see you. And you must be Grace." Grace rose to greet her, keeping her posture calm. "It is nice to meet you," she said, steady but polite. Madeline tilted her head. "You have certainly made an impression in a very short time." The implication hung in the air, but Grace refused to shrink. "I hope it is a good one," she replied gently. Madeline's smile tightened before she turned her attention back to Lucas. "Your parents are looking for you. They seem unsettled." Lucas kept his tone even. "I will speak with them later." Madeline nodded stiffly and moved on. Grace exhaled carefully. "She does not like me," she whispered. Lucas leaned slightly toward her. "She does not know you. That is different." Lunch was served, and Grace followed every etiquette rule she had practiced, though her mind wandered each time someone raised a phone to snap a photo. She knew the narrative was already forming online. The billionaire, the unknown woman, the scandal. At one point, a reporter approached the table, but Lucas handled it gracefully, redirecting the conversation with polished ease until the reporter backed away. "You handled that well," Grace said quietly. "So did you," Lucas replied. "You looked like you belonged here." Grace let out a soft laugh. "I definitely do not." Lucas studied her for a moment. "That is where you are wrong." As the luncheon wound down, the host invited Lucas to the stage to speak. Grace watched him walk to the microphone with practiced confidence, the room falling quiet around him. He spoke eloquently about community support, the importance of charity, and responsibility beyond wealth. But then something unexpected happened. As he concluded, he glanced toward Grace, and for the briefest moment, his guarded expression softened. It was small, subtle, fleeting, but Grace felt it, a ripple she could not name. As guests rose for applause, Lucas returned to her side. "Ready to go?" he asked. She nodded, but her thoughts lingered on that moment, the shift in his eyes that was not part of any rehearsal. Because for the first time since all of this began, Grace wondered if the lines of their arrangement had just blurred, even if only by an inch. Lucas and Grace left the country club just as the sun began dipping toward the horizon, casting long lines of gold across the parking lot. The drive back to the estate was quiet at first, not awkward, just full of unspoken thoughts neither of them seemed ready to voice. Grace watched the scenery pass outside her window, the lake shimmering between rows of tall pines. She could still feel the moment from the luncheon, lingering in her chest, the way Lucas had looked at her during his speech, as if he saw her in a different way than before. She told herself it was nothing, just part of the arrangement, but her heart refused to agree. When they arrived at the estate, Lucas walked with her toward the staff entrance, something he had never done before. "You did incredibly well today," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." Grace smiled softly. "That is kind, but I felt like my hands were shaking the entire time." Lucas shook his head. "If they were, I did not notice. Everyone saw a woman who held her own." Grace looked down, warmth spreading across her chest at the sincerity in his voice. She took a small breath. Thank you for standing beside me when the reporter approached. You should not have had to deal with that, Lucas replied. They were out of line. His tone was gentle, but firm enough to show how seriously he meant it. They paused at the staff corridor door, a quiet corner of the sprawling home. It felt like its own world here, separate from the spotlight and polished facades. Grace hesitated before speaking again. Lucas, was everything today acceptable for your plan? Did I do what you needed? Lucas's expression softened even further. Grace, it was not just acceptable. You handled every moment with grace and dignity. You made it impossible for anyone to believe what my parents want them to believe. That is more than I could have asked for. She felt her breath catch. He almost never praised anyone this openly. Before she could respond, Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small navy box. For a moment, Grace froze. What is that? He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant silver bracelet, the kind worn by women at the upper edges of society. It is for the next event, he explained. I had it made this morning. It is not extravagant, but it will look natural in photos. And it suits you. Grace's lips parted in surprise. You had this made for me? Lucas nodded. I wanted you to have something that made you feel prepared. Something that belongs in the world I am dragging you into. She touched the bracelet gently, her fingertips grazing the cool metal. It is beautiful, she whispered. I do not know what to say. You do not need to say anything, he replied softly. Just wear it when you feel ready. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them shifted into something quiet and fragile, something neither of them had rehearsed or planned for. Grace could feel the weight of her own heartbeat, steady but stronger than before. Lucas stepped back slightly, as if grounding himself. Get some rest, he said. Tonight was a lot. Grace nodded. You too. As she turned to walk down the hallway, Lucas watched her for a moment longer than necessary. He did not call out to her, but something in his expression revealed what he did not dare say. The line between arrangement and emotion had started to blur, and both of them felt it, even if they could not name it yet. Grace woke the next morning with a sense of calm she had not expected. The bracelet Lucas had given her rested on the nightstand, catching soft beams of early sunlight. She reached for it gently, running her fingers over the smooth silver surface. It felt like a reminder of yesterday's strange shift, a moment that had been carefully crafted for the public but had reached her in a way no contract ever intended. When she stepped into the kitchen for her morning duties, she found Lucas already there, leaning over the counter with a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up instantly, almost as if he had been waiting for her. Good morning, he said. His tone was quiet, but there was a warmth that had not been there before. Good morning, she replied. You are up early. Could not sleep, he admitted. Too many things on my mind. Grace began organizing breakfast trays, trying to focus on the familiar rhythm of her work, but Lucas remained near, his presence steady and unexpectedly gentle. You do not need to do that today, he said suddenly. Take a break this morning. Grace blinked, surprised. This is my job. And you worked all weekend helping me, he reminded her. You deserve a moment to breathe. She hesitated, then nodded slowly when she saw he meant it. They ended up sitting at the small breakfast table meant for staff breaks, a place Lucas had likely never sat before. Yet now, he seemed comfortable, almost at home. Grace stirred her tea, choosing her words carefully. Your world is bigger than I imagined. It was overwhelming at first. Lucas looked at her with an expression that softened every sharp line of his face. I know, he said quietly. I should have been more aware of what I was asking of you. Grace shook her head. You have been considerate. More than anyone would expect. He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of footsteps interrupted them. A house manager entered, surprised to see Lucas in the staff area, though she quickly masked it with professionalism. Mr. Hale, she said, there is a matter that needs your attention. Someone is here to see you. Lucas frowned. Who? Ms. Ross, the manager answered carefully. Grace felt her stomach tighten. Lucas's jaw tensed, but not with anger, more like resignation. I will speak with her, he said. As he stood, he glanced at Grace, his voice dropping to a low reassurance. Stay here. I will handle it. Grace watched him leave, a ripple of unease moving through her. She had no reason to fear Madeline, yet she knew the woman was capable of cutting words, sharpened by the kind of confidence only privilege and certainty could provide. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before Lucas returned. His steps were slower, his expression tense. Grace rose slightly from her seat. Is everything all right? Lucas pressed a hand along the back of his neck, a gesture that betrayed stress more than frustration. Madeline is questioning everything, he said. She told me she will not let this arrangement fall apart easily. Grace felt a flicker of worry. She thinks I am a threat. Lucas looked at her with sincerity that left no room for doubt. Because you are. Not in the way she believes, but in a way she cannot compete with. You do not want anything from me. Grace felt her breath catch. She had known her role was temporary, defined by ink and signatures. But something in the way Lucas said those words, something unplanned, unguarded, made the boundaries of their arrangement feel suddenly fragile. Lucas, she began softly, unsure how to bridge the space between what they agreed on and what she felt growing slowly, quietly. But he shook his head gently, not dismissing her, but grounding her. We will figure it out, he said, one event at a time. His voice held something steady, something that felt like more than a promise. For the first time, Grace wondered if they were still following the script they had written, or if a new story was beginning beneath it. Grace could sense the shift in the air long before the second charity event even began. The pressure, the whispers, the quiet tension surrounding Lucas had all grown heavier since Madeline's unexpected visit. Still, when she stepped out of the town car with him later that afternoon, she lifted her chin the way he had taught her, reminding herself that she belonged beside him for these moments, even if her heart fluttered with uncertainty. The event was a formal art exhibition benefiting local youth programs, held inside a renovated warehouse filled with soft lighting and modern sculptures. Lucas placed his hand gently on Grace's back as they walked in, guiding her through the entrance with quiet confidence. Remember, he whispered, just stay close to me, and everything will be fine. Grace nodded, though her breath caught when she realized cameras were already pointed in their direction. Reporters called his name, asking questions about his foundation, about the luncheon, and inevitably, about her. She remained steady, answering only when appropriate, exactly as they had practiced. Lucas stayed beside her through each conversation, subtly shielding her from the more intrusive questions. But even his calm expression could not hide the tension building in his shoulders. They made their way deeper into the gallery, past abstract canvases and displays of sculpted metal. Grace could not help but notice how Lucas's hand lingered near hers, as if he needed the reassurance of her presence. For a moment, she wondered if the gesture was part of the act or something unplanned, something real. As they paused by a sculpture made of twisted steel and stained glass, a woman approached them. She was older, dignified, and carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who she is. Lucas Hale, she greeted warmly. It has been far too long. Lucas smiled politely. Mrs. Hendricks, it is good to see you. The woman turned her kind eyes toward Grace. And you must be the young woman everyone is talking about. Grace steadied herself, offering a calm smile. It is nice to meet you, ma'am. Mrs. Hendricks studied her for a moment, gently, not judgmentally. You carry yourself well, she said approvingly. There is strength in quiet composure. Grace felt warmth move through her chest. Coming from someone respected in Lucas's circle, it meant more than she expected. Lucas glanced at Grace with a hint of pride before the conversation shifted to the charity's mission and the renovations of local art programs. Grace listened attentively, noticing how Lucas's tone softened when he spoke about helping children overcome barriers. It was a glimpse of him she rarely saw, a part unguarded by wealth or expectations. When Mrs. Hendricks moved on, Lucas exhaled slowly. You handled that beautifully, he said. She is a good judge of character. Grace smiled softly. She was kind. Not everyone has been. Lucas's jaw tightened slightly. People judge what they do not understand, what they think they know. You do not deserve to carry any of that. Before Grace could respond, a new wave of guests walked by, whispering just loud enough for her to catch fragments, speculation, assumptions, the usual mix of gossip. She tried to ignore it, but Lucas noticed the way her shoulders stiffened. Without thinking, he reached out and gently took her hand. Not staged, not rehearsed, just instinct. Grace looked up at him, startled by the sincerity in his eyes. You are not alone in this, he said softly. I promised I would not let anything happen to you. I meant it. His voice held something deeper than obligation. It felt like a vow, steady and quiet. For the rest of the evening, Lucas stayed closer than ever. Each time she glanced at him, she found him already watching her, as if making sure she was all right. And with each glance shared between them, the boundaries of their arrangement slipped further into uncertainty. Grace knew the contract governed their actions, but the feelings beginning to form between them obeyed no rules, no rehearsals, and certainly no signatures. And as they stepped out of the gallery into the cool evening air, she realized something she could not ignore anymore. She was falling for him. And from the way Lucas looked at her under the dim streetlights, she feared he might be falling too. The cool evening air still clung to Lucas's coat when he and Grace stepped inside the Hale estate, but neither of them seemed to notice the cold. Something heavier followed them in, something unspoken yet undeniably present. Grace could still feel the warmth of his hand on hers from the gallery, an innocent gesture that had settled deep in her chest in a way she had not expected. She removed her bracelet slowly, placing it on the table near the entryway, but when she turned, Lucas was still watching her with an expression that held more emotion than any scripted arrangement could explain. "You were incredible tonight," he said softly. "I meant every word I said." Grace lowered her gaze, unsure of how to absorb the sincerity in his voice. "It was easier because you were there," she admitted. Lucas stepped closer, just enough that she could feel his presence without breaking any boundary they had set. "Grace," he began, but the sound of hurried footsteps cut him off. His assistant, Aaron, appeared at the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Lucas, I am sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." Lucas frowned. "What is it?" Aaron handed him a tablet. "A report just went live. Someone leaked information about Grace. Her mother's medical bills, her job here, everything. They are questioning her motives." Grace felt her stomach drop. She stepped back instinctively, her fingers curling slightly as dread washed through her. "Who would do that?" she whispered. Lucas's jaw tightened as he scanned the article. "Madeline," he said quietly. "Or someone working for her." Grace pressed a hand to her forehead. "This is exactly what I feared. All of this is going to hurt you. Your reputation." "Stop," Lucas said firmly, lowering the tablet and stepping closer. "My reputation will recover. I have survived worse headlines. But you—" He paused, his expression darkened with protectiveness. "You do not deserve this. You did nothing wrong." Grace tried to steady her breath, but her eyes stung. "Lucas, people will say I used you, that I am taking advantage of you. They will twist everything." "Let them," Lucas said, his voice low and steady. "Let them say whatever they want. None of it is true." Grace shook her head, overwhelmed. "This is your world, not mine. I am not built for this kind of attention." Lucas reached for her hand without hesitation, his touch gentle but certain. "You should not have to be. I brought you into this. I will protect you from it." Grace looked up at him, surprised by the earnestness in his eyes. "But how?" "By telling the truth," he said. "All of it." Before she could respond, he gently released her hand and walked toward the main hall. Grace followed him, her pulse racing. They entered the large sitting room where his parents were waiting, clearly already aware of the article. His father stood with arms crossed, his mother looking torn between concern and frustration. Lucas stepped forward, his voice calm but unwavering. "This ends tonight," he said. "There will be no arranged marriage. There will be no negotiations. And there will be no more attacks on Grace." His father's expression hardened. "Lucas, you are throwing away a strategic alliance for a girl you barely know." Lucas did not flinch. "I am choosing my own life. And for once, I am choosing based on what feels right, not what benefits a merger." Grace felt her breath catch, her heart pressing painfully against her ribs. Lucas continued. "Grace did not pursue me. She did not ask for any of this. I pulled her into the chaos because I wanted a way out. She does not deserve to be punished for my decisions." His mother spoke softly. "Lucas, are you saying you care for her?" Lucas glanced briefly at Grace before answering. "Yes," he said simply. "More than I realized." Grace felt the world tilt gently around her. His father exhaled sharply, but his mother's expression softened, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Then you need to be honest with the public," she said. "All of this hiding is what created the space for rumors." Lucas nodded. "I plan to. Tomorrow morning." His parents exchanged a long look, and though they did not entirely approve, they did not object further. When the room finally fell quiet, Lucas turned back to Grace, his eyes meeting hers with a depth she had never seen from him before. Grace, he said softly, I know this started as an arrangement. A contract. A way out. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. But I do not want to pretend anymore. Not with you. Grace felt her breath falter. Her voice was barely above a whisper. What are you saying? Lucas reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so gentle it felt unreal. I am saying that somewhere between the first rehearsal and tonight, I stopped acting. Her heart ached at the truth she had been afraid to admit. Lucas. He held her gaze, steady and real. If you walk away now, I will understand. But if you stay, I will spend every day proving that this is no longer an arrangement to me. Grace felt warmth spread through her chest, soft and overwhelming. She stepped closer, closing the space between them. I am not going anywhere, she whispered. And when Lucas gently pulled her into his arms, it was not dramatic, not staged, not meant for any camera. It was quiet, sincere, and entirely theirs. A beginning born from chaos, settling into something honest, something true.